So today we're going to do kind of a secular wisdom pivot to looking at how to lead trauma-informed meditations for yourself and for others. And some of the reason why we do this is that if we're in any community that involves meditation, probably half or more are trauma survivors, at least. Yeah, at least. So if you figure 1 in 4 women has had some sort of horrible assault in her lifetime, it always doubles in Dharma centers. So we want to be trauma informed, whether we are someone who has trauma or we are supporting other people who have trauma or both. It's really important to be trauma informed because we might take basic meditation a little too flippantly and think, oh, we'll just do some breathing meditation. That works for everyone, as if our own experience was universal or our own trauma was unique, right? So we go back and forth between overgeneralizing and over specifying, right? We think my experience is completely universal. Everyone has had my own experience of either trauma and healing or not having trauma and things being traumatic. How they land for me is exactly how they land for everybody else. Universal, we're all in it together, overgeneralization. Or we think we are the only one who has ever suffered in this way, and no one else in the room possibly could have suffered more. Surely not, right? So we go back and forth with the whole topic of meditation and the whole topic of the spiritual path, where we can overgeneralize or over-individualize in all sorts of ways. And then when you're being invited to go within, you're kind of asking all the monsters to arise, right? You're giving space for all the buried stuff to show itself. So even if you yourself have not experienced any particularly traumatic thing or anything that you would like categorize as a capital T trauma, sometimes just the burbling unease of your life comes to the surface and is quite uncomfortable. So you're fine generally. You haven't had any disasters, or they're ones that you feel resolved with, whatever the case may be. But for some reason, just sitting still, you're overcome by your whole life up until this point, kind of swamps over you. So meditation seems like such a simple thing. Seems like such a simple thing to offer people. If you're in any kind of leadership role, let's just do this simple one, forgetting that for some people, that's actually not a simple thing at all. And that something as seemingly simple as the breath can be very triggering for some people and very soothing for others. And it's not actually about if they're traumatized or not. It's about everyone's unique kind of nervous system and way of processing trauma. So for some very traumatized people, breathing meditation is the answer, gets them settled. For others, it is completely activating. So what I want us to kind of look at is having some objectivity with our own experience, not going into our own story too much, but still touching it if we have our own trauma history, taking care of ourselves if something's getting activated. And at the same time, really thinking in terms of leadership or peer support, how we might help other people connect with meditation in the future, whether we're in a defined role or in kind of a peer support role, whether we're, sage on the stage or guide on the side, whichever version of leadership we might have. People might turn to us and ask us as advice about meditation, and it's good to have just a few bits of knowledge in the background that inform how we present the seemingly simple thing. Does that feel okay? So here we go. Lots of this will be quite familiar to probably most or all of us, the whole concept of trauma, what it is, how it functions, how it dysfunctions, what it does to a person. This is all very kind of in the weather, right? It's in the conversation, especially in spiritual communities. But I don't want to take it for granted that we all have the same information. So those of you that are very familiar with this conversation, maybe even hear it through the lens of, if I were to have to present this, how would I frame it? Yeah, or this same knowledge that I've heard many times, what's a way that it would sound like me if I were to present it? So try not to tune out, even if it's familiar. What is trauma? Trauma results from an event, a series of events, or a set of circumstances that is experienced as physically or emotionally harmful or life-threatening, having a lasting adverse effect on the individual's or community's functioning, and affecting mental, physical, social, emotional, and spiritual well-being. So it's not necessarily just a bad thing happened. It's that the bad thing that happened is having a lasting effect of some kind and is showing itself in unexpected areas unrelated to the event or not really tied to the exact event, right? So Gabor Mate, our famous Gabor Mate with the like sweetest face, he says, trauma is not what happens to you, it's what happens inside you as the result of what's happening to you. Trauma is that scarring that makes you less flexible, more rigid, less feeling, more defended. Yeah. And when we're kind of looking at those two bits, what happening inside of you is the result of what happened to you. The result making you less flexible, more rigid, more feeling, more defended. Take a quote like this and kind of look at your own experience. And then also kind of look at when you see people rigid, when you see people inflexible, when you see them defensive, you can probably make a guess something has happened, right? And so rather than be like, come on, loosen up, be like, oh, something has happened, right? And it helps you lead with compassion to know that rather than to lead with frustration observing that. So he says it's a psychic wound that hardens you psychologically and then interferes with your ability to grow and develop. It pains you now, and you're acting out of pain. It induces fear, and now you're acting out of fear. So it doesn't matter if it's real or imagined in this moment. It doesn't matter if for someone else it wouldn't have been a big deal. It's having some kind of lasting effect. Then, so we have like single event trauma, like an earthquake, right? We have complex trauma, which is like ongoing, repetitive, child abuse, neglect, domestic violence, these things. We have developmental trauma, so developmental and neurological effects in children through ongoing trauma. And then we have intergenerational trauma or collective trauma. So on that one, it's good to kind of dive down a little bit that the cumulative emotional and psychological wounding over the lifespan and across generations emanating from massive group trauma and experiences. This is what we're talking about with intergenerational trauma. And we need to be particularly aware of that's impact on people of color, right? Lots of different kinds of people, but in particular, people of color. So Dr. Maria Yellowhorse, she has some really beautiful writings that help explain this. So in the context of leading trauma-informed meditation, we need to be aware of the diversity of emotional triggers that may arise by simply being still and silent. For some people, just being still and silent, everything roars to the surface. They haven't even technically started to meditate yet, and they might just be overcome with emotion. So we need to know that can happen and also not overreact when it happens, because sometimes it's actually quite good news. They're connecting, they're getting into it, they're feeling the depth of the human experience. They're actually not distracted as much as usual, right? They've stopped scrolling, they've stopped fiddling, they've put things down, and like life's rich pageant is now revealing itself to them. So when people are overcome and we're leading a meditation, we also don't want to overreact and be like, oh my God, they're crying. Oh my God, they're freaking out. Just kind of be like, yeah, all right, let's give them a minute. It might just roll through. It might just be a really natural stage for them. We don't have to worry unless it becomes worrying. A reaction from someone from being still is not enough to kind of like address, right? But it just kind of like you're aware as the meditation leader it's happening, and you might check on them if it doesn't roll through at kind of a average speed or if it escalates. Yeah, just kind of knowing that that's very normal. And even people without any particular trauma, this can happen. Just sitting still and being silent, you become overcome with emotion is actually quite normal. Yeah. Okay, so if we're the meditation leader, we need to be both sensitive to the needs of the group while not taking the meditator's reactions, such as fidgeting or leaving, personally. Okay, so we want responsiveness, attentiveness, without micromanaging or being codependent. That's a really journey for our life, also when we're a meditation leader, right? Okay, so this is just like a general rule. What would this look like if it was micromanaging or codependent, right? Someone's having a moment. What would be an overreaction? Yes, yes. in a really performative way, like, oh, I'll save you. Here's the tissues. Yeah. Yeah, really. Yeah, like that. If someone leaves running, like, have a look, but they also might be being melodramatic and histrionic and like a little bit of a drama queen. You have to really tune in to your life experience and feel it in the moment of, does this feel like a crisis or does this feel like melodrama? And of course, someone in melodrama is very much suffering, but it's the kind of suffering they will sort themselves out. And if they get attention, it might escalate. And you're just kind of like, all right, we'll keep the light on for you. Best of luck. Anyway, back to it. Is it the sort of thing that has disrupted the equilibrium of the rest of the group? Right? Because if someone runs out crying, even if they're fine and you know them to be fine and they do this once a week, the rest of the group might not know that and be fully distracted the whole rest of the session. So you might need to say a couple sensible, simple things like, oh, they told me earlier they're going through a bit of a rough pocket. They'll be right. We'll check on them after. Okay, so back into it. So it's something about touch it and return. Don't give it a whole story. People love drama, right? And the drama will take over their meditation very easily. Nice, sweet, compassionate people, they'll be like, oh, good, something to be distracted by. I didn't want to look at myself. Thank goodness someone else is going through it, right? So if you can kind of do that, like address, simple, basic, return to the meditation. Or if there's like a senior student in the room, you might give them a meaningful look, like, go check on them. Yeah, so senior students, if you get a meaningful look, that might be what it means. Go check on them. Yeah, go check on them. If you're a meditation leader in a new group that you don't know, it is helpful to have a buddy for just that kind of occasion, right? So someone that might not themselves be necessarily a meditation leader, but is like a sensible, kind person, right? Who can then go if you get someone who's popped and just kind of check on them. Yep, and you can even say in the meditation, oh, so-and-so's gone to check on them. And so back to the practice. Yeah. Is it making sense so far? Yeah, so we'll keep going and then we'll kind of flesh it out a bit more. So correlation is not causation. We know this in general. Correlation is not causation. Okay, so just because someone is having a freak out doesn't mean the meditation is what made them freak out. Their life up until this point is possibly related to why they freaked out. And also it could be that the meditation itself was the catalyst, but we don't want to like fall into the trap of getting too precious about how we lead meditations or lead ourselves through meditations. And at the same time, we want to make sure that we're sensitive because big stuff comes up for folks. And so that line of what's a big enough deal to stop the meditation and go and address it, the first guinea pig is you, right? The first guinea pig is you, whether you have trauma or not. You've had days where you sit down to meditate and your mind does not want to meditate. It's like, I have many errands, I have many busyness, I have many stresses, I have many issues, I have blah, 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 and you're in that kind of like, right? One of those. And is it a big enough deal to stop the meditation? How do you know? You have to know yourself, right? To go, okay, this is the busyness of, I have too much on my plate. And actually, if I meditate, when I return to my plate, it will be a little bit clearer. So plate, I see you, over there, please, back to the meditation. Or, oh, actually, that one interaction with so-and-so is really hurting my heart. I need to kind of unpack it a little bit, or I need to talk to a friend, or I need to talk to them, or I need to write about it. And I need to kind of frame it in some kind of way enough that I can put it to bed for a second. It is actually really eating me. So you start to know yourself of when is it big enough to pause the meditation and address it, and when is it just another distraction that needs attention, but not this second. Not the urgency. You start to be able to assess urgency. Yeah. So if you know yourself, it will be easier to understand others, even though others don't have the same experience or responses as you. You get kind of just more tuned into the various reactions of people and when is it a big enough deal and when isn't it. And you will not always be right. And that is okay, right? People are adults. They got here independently, right? Under their own steam. We are trying to be of benefit to all sentient beings, but it doesn't mean we should magically be able to read all of their minds. People are adults. If they need help, they can ask for help. And I think all of us kind of know in our tummy somewhere when it's like, oh, they're going through it. Let's go look after them. You with me so far? So it's conditioned intuition, right? It's your intuition, but it's conditioned by dharma and self-awareness. It's not just kind of like something bad, panic. It's not that. So understanding urgency is really important. So it's good for us to understand ACEs, right? A lot of you know this acronym, Adverse Childhood Experiences. So basically, this is how we come to understand how traumatized a person is based on what they came into the moment with. So like someone with a lot of ACEs, a lot of adverse childhood experiences, experiencing an earthquake might experience that earthquake different to someone who has no ACEs or few ACEs. So multiple ACEs are associated with higher risk of poor health. And people with more ACEs are more likely to be activated in the moment of meditation, poking something provocative, right? Like say the meditation on death and impermanence, we might all be somewhat activated by the reality and the imminence of our death and might be somewhat activated by having wasted time. But if we've had a lot of ACEs and we've had a lot of adverse experiences, particularly related to death, that same meditation might land differently. You with me? Yeah. Okay, ACEs. So these can also look, okay, so we normally talk about like household ACEs or community ACEs, which are basically like various forms of neglect, right? Or abuse and neglect, household or community. But also there are things like environmental ACEs, like you've been through a natural disaster, you've been through a flood or a famine or a war or something like that. So kind of having a sense that people's background informs how they hear the Dharma, even the simplest of meditations. This is just good background knowing for us, because sometimes what happens is that when people suffer, we have a lot of patience for certain forms and not much patience for others. And we think that thing you're experiencing is not a big deal for me. It shouldn't be a big deal for you, right? Like we get a little bit too concrete about it and we're like, come on, get over it. And it makes us a little bit brusque, a little bit too harsh, right? Or it's actually very relatable and that makes it confronting and we want to shut it down. So just kind of knowing that people come into the room with lots of stuff and probably everyone has a couple of these. Yeah, everyone's got a couple of these. Some people got lots of them. Right. I take no credit. It's only my research abilities. The source is at the bottom if you guys want to look at the slides later. Okay, so the content of the meditation might be the trigger. The quiet space might allow old issues to arise. Breathing and grounding techniques related to the body may soothe, or they bring a person to an experience that feels unsafe. And this is the big one, right? Because people kind of have this assumption that a body relaxation is going to settle people down. It does a lot. For some people, it does not, because the body is not a safe place. Yeah. So an invitation to go within, like really explore your experience of this, or really go into your experience of that, that might trigger hypervigilance, right? So as individuals, it's skillful to notice when and if we're triggered without building a big story about it, and also to ask for the support we need. So if we're the one getting triggered, we need to try and have the maturity that says, is this something I can work out by myself, or is this something I need help with? If it's something I need help with, I need to ask for help and not expect people to read our minds and not expect people to chase us, right? And if we're the one in the leadership position, we want to kind of be alert and see if we're noticing someone's having a moment and really consciously try and preempt those triggers by using language that feels really permissive, like do this, and if that's not comfortable, do that. Do this, but if you want to, you could do it this way. And you make it sound really flexible, and it can sound like, oh, so many words, oh, so many hoops, but it actually can prevent a lot of triggers for folks. And some folks might not even realize they're going to get triggered until they sit still, right? It's not like they're going to come in with their resume of trauma and be like, here are the things to expect from me. No, they don't know what to expect from themselves. Yeah. So we want to start with physical safety, right? Make sure that it really feels safe in the space, Then we want to look at psychological safety. Are people being accepting? Are they being warm? Then emotional safety, are they feeling like they don't have to share, but they're welcome to both, right? Is there kind of a social safety? Like, do you make it easy for them to say no? Is it easy for them to say no to stuff? Or do they feel kind of a peer pressure like they have to? Like, for example, when we all prostrate at the beginning, there's a certain peer pressure that can kick in, and I should have, but forgot, because I forgot to say, you don't have to do this. We're going to prostrate because we're Buddhist. Yeah. And normally I give some disclaimer. Totally forgot this time. Apologies. So you want to make sure that like the norms are kind of explained, and that the norms are also given in such a way that they're invitations, not mandates. You know what I mean? So things like that I just like, I take it for granted because it's like, I'm so used to it and I'm all in, right? I'm like, now do Dharma, right? I forget sometimes to say these things. So if you can kind of make a mental note, the norms that you're going to establish in a group, name them, and then also give people flexibility to not necessarily do them. Okay, and then moral safety, this one's a little bit more amorphous, a little bit more abstract, but moral safety, this can be something like if it feels not right that we don't have this, or not right that we don't have that the person can say that and not be kind of, I don't know, put down for it, right? Like if it's not easy for David to get in his chair, he should feel safe to be able to say like, you guys need bigger doorways, and us to go, we do need bigger doorways. Sorry, David. We should be able to say that with a like really easy conversation. It shouldn't be like, justify. Look, we really need to, but blah, 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 and like make it your job to soothe us. That would be the wrong way, right? But we do that, don't we? It's like if we haven't thought of an accommodation and then someone points it out, we can get really defensive. Like if there's someone who is really hard of hearing in here and they said, you know what, Yönten, you really need someone who signs, or you need to really overuse your diction so I can read your lips, or I need this accommodation or that accommodation. We'd have to get a little organized because we're not totally organized for folks who are hard of hearing. And it might trigger a defensiveness in us, like, oh, well, we meant to, or we've never had to deal with this before. No, and it's like, well, don't make it their problem. They're the one who has a vulnerability. Say, oh, thanks for letting me know. We're going to try and figure it out. I'll let you know when we've got some things in place. What can we do in the meantime that's going to support you? Do you know what I mean? Like we very often get defensive when people are really taking a risk by asking. Okay. So it's important to recognize that traumatic experiences are not always rooted in childhood, and may be a response to abuse, violence, or frightening events in adulthood. Experiences of discrimination increase the risk of traumatic symptoms. So regular exposure to subtle discrimination and microaggressions can over time elicit similar symptoms to severe trauma. For example, racial trauma, which refers to the mental and emotional injury caused by encounters with racial bias and ethnic discrimination, racism, and hate crimes. Vicarious traumatic stressors are the indirect trauma impacts of living with discrimination and inequality, such as systemic racism. So racial trauma can also be intergenerational, meaning it can affect multiple generations, especially through atrocities like genocide, being enslaved, or other experiences of injustice or lack of liberty, such as being in an internment camp or detention center. This might seem really obvious, especially in Portland. Right? We might feel like we very much understand this, but sometimes in real time, we don't understand why someone looks too sensitive, right? Because what's happening doesn't seem like a big deal. And we didn't realize they actually came in upregulated because the social condition is at them all the time, right? The social environment is always telling them you're not quite all right. You're not quite welcome. And so they come in already somewhat activated. And so just a couple of things get to them and trigger them, and is really understandable and really natural. But if we don't realize these kind of background influences, we get impatient and think, this is such a big deal. You're being so sensitive, right? So kind of making these environments really welcoming intentionally without being weird about it is important. when we see someone who's not the norm of our kind of social group, to not get too excited when there's like a different person, like, yay, that's kind of what Portlandians do, right? Because we get so excited. Oh, you're a little bit different. We're going to be super nice to you. And, they're like, oh, for God's sake, right? Like it's kind of goes too much the other way. And it's like highlighting their difference even more. They're like, look, it's so exciting. And that also doesn't help, right? That also doesn't help. Bless Portland. Oh, Portland. But often the people don't come back. They're like, wow, they were really nice and it was a lot and I'm going to go home now. Yeah. So just knowing that. Okay. So this is a really famous but very important quote that I think we should all sit with sometimes. Trauma in a person, decontextualized over time, looks like personality. Trauma in a family, decontextualized over time, looks like family traits. Trauma in a people, decontextualized over time, looks like culture. Yeah. So more on that, the classic Trauma and Recovery, Judith Herman, but really kind of understanding that trauma unaddressed, there are habit patterns that arise, right? And whether they're adaptive or maladaptive, they just become really entrenched in how people respond to the world, and expecting folks to just drop it because we're in a safe place with friendly people doing a cool thing is too much to ask of people, right? So we have to kind of hold this in awareness as another version of the truth of suffering, right? We know everyone suffers, whether we have a capital T trauma in our life or not. Absolutely, everyone suffers. And specific types of trauma bleed through and taint all other behaviors or most other behaviors in life. And hopefully that just makes us more compassionate. But what it can do is make us annoyed and impatient. Like, I suffer that way too. And you're like, well, you might, but you don't have the same baggage coming to it. So it doesn't affect you the same way it affects them. So it gives you some patience. The classic meme, right? Reality, right? Which is that one gets more than is needed while the others get less than is needed. And there's a huge disparity. And then we try and fix it with equality and give everyone the same conditions. But it doesn't work, right? The assumption is that everyone benefits from the same supports. And this is considered to be equal treatment, but it's actually not useful. And you see the short person struggling there. Then equity, everyone gets the support they need, which produces equity, right? So you're able to access the same kind of experience. Some people need more help to access that experience than others. And then justice, all three can see the game because the supports or accommodations, because the causes for inequity were addressed. So systemic barriers have been removed. This is a bit of a big ask, right? But we can work on equity. In the context of guiding meditation and development of meditation spaces, we need to look at creating, rebuilding, and or emphasizing equity and justice. And as individuals, we hope to have these, and also we need to notice and ask for the support we need, both. So what can happen? Sure, would you pass the mic down?
Just what's...
Oh, there's a million. Yeah, there's a million. Yeah, this is kind of a standard presentation of, definitions of terms. Yeah. So when we're looking at equity, what we're trying to say is, in this meditation space, what outcome do we want? Some people will need this. Some people will need this, 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 and this to get the same result. And that doesn't mean this person who needs extra accommodations is bad, right? Or that we're being unequal by saying you get these supports, this whole bag of supports, whereas the regular people get this one or two things. Right? It's understanding that we're trying to help the whole group have a similar experience. And so some people will need more help than others. An example of trauma in a people decontextualized over time looks like culture. I always think of, the Native American reservations in Montana where I grew up, right? Where there's a lot of drug abuse and there's a lot of child abuse and there's a lot of alcoholism, and none of that is their culture. None of that was existing in their culture. And we all know that that is the result of extreme trauma, repetitive trauma, and then the lost generation of taking a whole generation of people out of their original context and putting them in colonialism, all of this horrible stuff. And now it looks like, oh, the culture of the res is drug and alcohol abuse. The culture of the res is child abuse. It looks like that, but it's trauma decontextualized. These maladaptive patterns of trying to soften their suffering, we go to the symptom, right, not to the cure. And this is the issue.
So I asked this question from a systems perspective. Where do you place yourself in the system to create change if you don't understand the causes and conditions?
Yeah, which is why it's too big a question. You have to say, which context are we talking about? If we're talking about a meditation center, I've got a slide for that. Yeah, right. Yeah, if we're talking about a meditation center, that we can do. That we can do. If we're talking about Portland or Oregon or the United States, I think that's a bigger question. It's much of this is self-evident, I'm guessing, but it's just good to keep in awareness. All right. So like how to create trauma-informed meditation spaces, friendly, not forced. Friendly, not forced. Friendly, not forced. So avoid love bombing, being too excited, or fake friendliness, because this is how cults are formed. Also, be your genuine, authentic form of friendly, but do be friendly and welcoming, right? So if you're someone who is lucky enough to feel safe in a space, it's good to take responsibility to be warm, take responsibility to be welcoming, and to not just kind of take it for granted that you feel safe here, but actually use your privilege, right? And be like, is there anyone here that doesn't seem like they feel safe? Can I be warm and welcoming in a way that is not creepy? In a way that's not, culty, right? Love bombing's got a lot of different problems to it, right? One of it is just grosses people out, right? And that's kind of the best thing that can happen is people are grossed out. The worst thing that can happen with love bombing is that people believe you, get dependent on you, and like really it becomes an issue. And then often when they're finally disappointed that you're not quite as loving as the love bomb behavior seems to indicate, they're deeply disillusioned, disappointed, and full of sadness and rage, right? So if it's not a sustainable amount of love bombing, if it's not genuine love bombing, just be normal, please. Yes. But do you take my point about, but nevertheless, like be friendly and warm if you're feeling safe? Yeah, don't just kind of be passive and like, I'm comfortable here anyway, best of luck to you. I'm going to do my own thing. The kind of I'm going to do my own thing behavior is not what we want in these community spaces, right? We want this real sense of, is how I am of benefit to others? And of course, first, do no harm. And some days you're feeling warm and some days you're feeling vulnerable yourself. You don't need to force it, but just kind of acknowledging when you do feel safe and you feel like, I know the norms of this place, to really welcome people in a way that's authentic to you. Orienting and signaling safety. This is let folks know the norms and amenities. Like people are put so at ease to know where the toilets are. They're put so at ease to know where snack options and water options are. And also people will be prostrating, don't worry, you don't have to. This is a good reminder for me, right? But a good reminder for all of us of some prayers will be done. You don't have to do them. This will happen. You don't have to. You're welcome here. You don't have to do all the things. This dress is not your final outcome. Don't worry. We're not like waiting with razors in the back. Don't worry. Like it's somehow like naming the norms in really matter-of-fact ways, and then giving permission to participate or not. And then have ways of indicating safety in the welcome, transition, and departure procedures. Animals, but people have got religious trauma. So it's important to do little like silly seeming signaling so people know that you're safe. Yeah, it's got to still be authentic to you, right? But little signalings like thinking, all right, so how can we make people of color feel more welcome here, right? Like we don't have as many people of color at Maitripa College as there are in the population surrounding the college. It should be the same per capita percentages. What do we need to do so that people of color feel more welcome? Certainly Asian people feel welcome here, but we're Tibetan Buddhists, right? And then like Alex's husband is Asian, so that helps. And one of our staff is Asian, so that helps. So sometimes it's just like, there's other ones of yourself around make you feel safe. But how do you get the first one, right? You have to capture them, but then they're freaked out because you love bomb them. That's the thing, right? there's something about knowing where there is vulnerability and addressing it in like quiet, non-obnoxious ways really helps folks. Yeah. Okay. Other ways are like so basic, but easy exits. Yeah, easy exits. Have the door, people can leave easily, don't block the doorway, and give people permission to get up and stand and move if they need to. Even in the welcome spiel, be like, if at any point you're feeling uncomfortable during the meditation, please feel free to get up and leave, no worries. Just these simple things really help people put themselves at ease. So giving choices like not having people just focus on the breath, which can be triggering, say the breath or this other object, right? And you hear me do that periodically. And particularly if it's a new group of people, I make a special intention to do that, to say, okay, so we'll just take a minute and let surface distractions settle. And we'll use the breath. And if that doesn't feel comfortable, you can use another sensory sensation. And if you prefer, a mental image, right? So you're giving the kind of like prominent sort of instruction, and then you're given a couple of other options. And even if they don't want any of those options, just the fact that you gave options will help them relax. So let's do 15 minutes to discuss more ways to create trauma-informed meditation spaces, and then we'll do a trauma-informed meditation itself and just a few variations of how those might look, particularly if you're doing like a one-on-one with someone who is like very activated, or if you're doing a group of people who's particularly vulnerable, some kind of key meditations that might help to settle them. Before we do this discussion, I also just kind of want to do general things. You know, in somewhere like Portland, there can be over-identification with trauma, right? Like you can very much become identified as a trauma survivor of this or a trauma survivor of that, such that it becomes its own problem. In other places, trauma is never discussed, and that's its own problem. So like everything, not too tight, not too loose, right? And if people are very in their trauma identity, it might be that their recovery process is in its early stages and they just need to be there for a while. And it could have switched over into now that is their default excuse for all their problematic behavior. And it's like not really our problem, which it is, unless they're like in our everyday world and having a direct impact on kind of our daily life. If there's someone who is not in our daily life, whether they're over-identified with their trauma or they're new in their healing journey and need to be, it's not really our problem. It's their life. Yeah, just love them. It's suffering either way. But you know that feeling of when it's a bit obnoxious and when people start talking about their trauma as if they are the only one who has ever suffered in that way, and they talk about it in a way that maybe they're just getting comfort level with the vocabulary and the language around it and not realize that there's maybe other people in the room newer in their healing journey and they're getting activated. You know, this often happens generationally where young people are more comfortable talking about things than older people. So the young person's talking about this very traumatic event of theirs in explicit detail, and older members of the group may have experienced the exact same thing and never talked about it, and now they're like activated. And they don't have the same tools and resources. So just kind of like navigating all of that with people, of course we lead with compassion. If we're navigating it with ourselves, it's good to ask ourselves, why are we sharing this story? Are we sharing this story to ask for support? Then lead with, I need your support. Like we have to like spell it out when it's these touchy subjects. I'm sharing this because I need your support. Or I'm sharing this because I want to ease the minds of fellow sufferers. Or I'm sharing this because I think it's an important perspective for this group to hear. But like lead with, why are you sharing this? Because sometimes people are just used to sharing it and it doesn't have the intentionality it needs to actually have a beneficial effect. Is this resonating? Have you seen this happen in groups sometimes? So, you know, there's the what we do for the group when we're in the leadership position, those kind of check boxes. And then there's what do we do ourselves if we're the one triggered, those check boxes, and just kind of being able to pivot back and forth between, okay, when I'm triggered, here are some of the things I'll do. When I see other people triggered, here are some of the things I'll do. And just very gentle strategies.
I'm just like, maybe you don't have an answer, but I was just reflecting on like, if you have to like, there's a situation when someone is like appropriately like suffering and like they need support. Like, I know like it's a big thing of like you assess and everything and you feel it, but at which point like do you like kind of like intervene? Like if it's like, for example, like someone in your class or like someone that you will see like regularly, that's not like in your daily life.
Yeah.
Like I don't know. It's maybe like maybe just
when to say something or when to do something.
yeah, like is it your place to sometime like offer like some kind of a place they can go for support, or it's just no, like you just keep that boundary?
It depends on who you are in the space, right? Like who you are in the space. If you're in a leadership position in the space, I think it very much is your job to do the first step of just, are you okay? You know, and sometimes what makes us anxious as people in leadership positions is feeling like we need to have all of the steps before we make the first step, and then we're kind of paralyzed. And we don't need all of the steps, we just need the first step. You know, and the first step is just, are you okay? Make the approach. And then you take it from there, because you're never alone, right? With all of this, you can feel like, oh God, I can't really take responsibility for the whole spectrum of this person's life and their trauma and their recovery process and but maybe I should be, I'm trying to be a bodhisattva. And, you know, kind of psych yourself out when really like all they need is some water, you know, and be like, that I can do, you know? So what you want is just, do I feel up for the responsibility of step one? And then do I feel comfortable in responsibility for step two? Are there other people in this area who are in more leadership positions who I should defer to? Or does it seem like they have a karmic connection with me and it's better I just go for it? You know, you have to take it in the moment, but this mental health first aid kind of acronym that we use, this is quite useful. The approach A, you assess the risk of suicide harm. Yeah. Are they a threat to themselves or others? Then yeah, you got to go in. Yeah. But it might not be you. It might be that you ask someone in a leadership position, oi, that person looks like they're at risk. I'm flagging it. Or it might be too time sensitive and you need to go in. I mean, 911 exists for these reasons. And then step two is just to listen. And that's another point of pressure, right? Where it feels like if you're listening, you have to do something. Or if you're listening, you need a solution. And you could just listen. And often that is all they need, is just compassionate bearing witness to go, oh, this sounds really hard. Yeah. And then you just kind of ask or give like reassurance that like you're not a bad person, or that this is very normal, or something that is true, right? And then access to information. So, you know, where is the information for mental health? The place that you're at hopefully has some sort of resource list, some sort of referral list. I've got my list of psychotherapists who understand about Buddhism, right? So if they need a psychotherapist who understands things about Buddhism, there's that. Appropriate professional help, and encourage self-help and other support strategies. The thing I hear Venerable Chitso say all the time is, what has worked for you in the past? I hear you say that, and that is a really good one, because they often already have their own solution. One step at a time.
Well, yeah, well, I think it's really helpful to just be like, can I hold the responsibility for step one? I think it's very helpful then.
Yeah, what you were just saying about what has worked for you in the past makes me think of resilience, and how that's such an important part of this conversation of trauma. And I think it sometimes gets lost, which is, I think, also what was said in the readings,
Yeah.
and because exposure to trauma might also come with exposure to resilience building skills and community and so on. And so I think I just wanted to mention that.
We do need to have faith that people know what they need. And unless they are really upregulated, they're grown-ups and they can self-soothe and they can ask for what they need. And sometimes chasing is not the right thing to do, right? And it gets kind of codependent and creepy. And it's like, no, I trust you. You seem like a smart, capable person who is introspective. And, I'm going to give it a minute before I go look for you. And also, we don't want a culture of chasing people, right? It gets really enmeshed and weird and no, right? And also if someone is gone and then really gone, we're going to worry. So let's, if it's been too long, yeah, we're going to go find you if it's been too long, or if you didn't let us know. Like sometimes when people have been triggered and they like super triggered, they'll send a quick email that says, I will not be back for the rest of the day. And you're like, fair enough. Circle back when you want to, like that. So if you're the one departing and it's going to be longer than kind of a moment, if you, I don't know, 20 minutes or whatever, it's going to be a while. It's nice to let someone know I'm fine. I just need space. Just give them that. You don't even have to say what the trigger is. You don't have to say how long. You don't have to say anything. Just I'm fine enough. I'll be back. Fine enough, Or in an hour, can somebody come and give me a hug, but not earlier than an hour, because otherwise I'll punch you. I'm very upregulated right now. No, you know yourself, right? We all know ourselves. So yeah, gently, and ask for what you need. And if people aren't asking for what they need, it is not our job to read their mind. Yeah, we're just doing our best to tune in. We're doing our best to get our intuition really sensitized. And at the same time, the main thing is trying to create a nice, welcoming space that's the best conditions they can be, knowing it'll never be perfect. So being trauma informed at the very basis is just making people know that they have options and they are welcome. They have options and they're welcome.
I know I feel great if someone's taking care of themselves like you did. And that's really cool. Just really, yeah, if we can create that. And I guess for all of us, it's like not just up to Venerable Yönten. Hopefully you can feel that in the class as well.
Totally. Yeah, totally. And, if you're I guess the side variation here is, what if you're the one triggered and you're the one leading the meditation, right? Right? Pare it back, right? Pare it back to its essential components and breathe, right? Pare it back. Yeah. And there is something about holding the space for others that I feel like gives you an extra capacity to hold hard things, and then you might fall apart later. But in the moment, often the Buddha's got your back, right? They're like, okay, you're doing this for the sentient beings, keep your act together, Once there was a very drunk person came in to the session, because we didn't lock any doors, and we were all just sitting there in meditation, and this guy came in and he was like looking at all the things, and I thought, all right, he's looking at all the things. He's not totally reading the room that we're like not in a chatting space. But anyway, because we were all sitting quietly in Shine, and he's looking around, and then he starts shouting at the Buddhas and he starts swearing. And I could see my retreater is like opening one eye and looking at me like, you gonna do something? I'm like, I've got it. And I get up and I was like, oh, right now is actually meditation. But if you want to come back later and look at some of these things, you can. And he went, oh, and he started swearing at me and he got right in my face. And I was like, all right, so actually this is not acceptable behavior in this space. So I'm going to have to ask you to leave. And he was like, rah, 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 rah. I was like, all right, yep, I don't like being spoken to that way. So I'm going to have to ask you to leave. And I just kept holding my ground. He got right in my face. And then eventually he was like, storms out. I was like, so anyway, suffering sentient beings, and then back in, and everyone was kind of like, oh, that was really awkward and scary. Awkward and scary, and we're back. And there's something about like, name it the right amount, right? Don't overname it, right? Don't be like, that was a whole thing, the day is ruined, like very easily it could be that, or like, we need locks, or we need mental health care, or whatever your response is. Like, it's a thing that happens with people. What are you going to do? Right. And if you hang out with me, drunk people will find me. So that's also just something to know about me, right? I attract them. I love them. They love me. Occasionally they erupt. It's fine. I don't know why it's karmic. So, it's one of these things where if you're the one setting the tone. So set the tone with sensibleness. You don't have to be brilliantly insightful. You don't have to say the magic profound thing. Just say the very basic common sense truth. Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Let's do 2 groups and just 15 minutes brainstorm how to create trauma-informed meditation spaces. And then we'll talk.